Afternoon, everybody. Just waiting for a few more people to join, and then we'll get started. Cool. Well, I can see a bunch of people coming in now, so I'll get started. So, if any of you saw the presentation that I gave at last year's event, it's kind of exactly the same, but updated. So I'm going to revisit what we did last year and also update it for 2020. So this is, if you always do what you always did, then you always get what you always got. It's been credited to Henry T. Ford, Albert Einstein, and Mark Twain. So this is going to be very much a whistle-stop tour of tech and cybercrime, as I'm really just the warm-up act for Ben Hammersley that you all kind of really want to see who's on after me. So we're good at predicting the near future, but bad at predicting the longer term. The state of cybercrime today is more a reflection on the way that we think about things rather than actually what we do. Cybercrime's accelerating at an uncontrollable pace and one that is unabating. Criminals, i.e. the attackers, are innovating or stealing at an incredible rate and are ahead of the defenders, i.e. us, and we are losing the battle currently. Just look at the number of records that were breached in 2020. So far, it's estimated that that was 36 billion records. The current world population is only 7.8 billion, meaning that everyone on the planet has been breached at least 4.6 times this year alone. Is it just me, or does anybody else find that an absolutely staggering number? Now, not everyone has been compromised, granted, I accept that, or lost information. So some people have been breached multiple times and others not at all. So it's just the sheer scale that's astounding. And this is getting worse year on year. So we need to change the way we think. If we always act the way that we do in security, then we'll always get the same result: insecurity and breaches. Gone are the days of the kind of if or when of a security incident. We now live in an age of how bad, and also how can I manage the optics of the situation. While we work and secure things as we do today, we are going to continue to suffer breaches. So when I did the first one of these, I kind of said, yeah, I was never really going to do another one. And so I could kind of come up with all sorts of outlandish suggestions as what might happen by 2022 and beyond. The unfortunate thing is that the people liked the presentation and kind of wanted me to come back and do it again. So I suppose I better look back and see whether it was accurate or not. As I said before, as humans, we're reasonably good at predicting something in the short term, but the further you get out, the less predictable that becomes. So what I'm going to try and do is cover the past up to 2022, but also look beyond that as well, and hopefully look back on it in 10 years' time and work out I got it spectacularly wrong. So my first prediction was around UK 5G. So I talked about 5G and whether it be here by 2022. And I think we had Huawei in the game at the time. And you heard Lord Jonathan this morning talk about, the issues with Huawei and chip manufacture and the ability to be able to rely upon American chips within the set itself in order to use it. However, Ericsson has now stepped in as a viable alternative. We've already seen the likes of EE start to roll out Ericsson kit at the edge for 5G, but we're still very low in terms of coverage. It's somewhere between 54 and 112 towns or cities that are currently covered. However, there's a massive economic case. Now that we're living in a COVID world, it's been estimated that the rolling out 5G at an accelerated rate into the UK would add 15 billion in the first year to the UK economy. So my bet is that with business cases like that and looking at the economics of the current UK landscape, the likelihood is that 5G will accelerate. So a lot of my predictions, I think, will probably come true within the 2022 timeframe. DOS, DDoS, big DDoS, clearly with high bandwidth endpoints is going to be likely. It's going to be likely that there will be some private 5G infrastructure. The idea is that you'll be able to collect things together on a 5G network, and also you'll be able to connect anything from anywhere. That's still a goal that's likely to be reached by 2022. However, there are a few things that I said that I'm not entirely sure are going to be there or not. Narrowband IoT services, maybe. It's going to depend on manufacturers. And actually, I'll talk about the Internet of Everything shortly, because that was another one of my predictions. One of the big things, though, is going to be battery technology for narrowband IoT services using 5G. And interestingly, there's two new battery technologies that are coming into the market. A single atom of nuclear waste in an industrial diamond casing that provides pretty much limitless power to low power and narrowband IoT devices. And also, kind of the latest invention is a graphene battery, which is basically graphene is a single atom thick carbon sheet. And what they found is that with the magnetic flux of the Earth's core, what actually happens is that graphene sheet ripples, and if you put the appropriate anodes and cathodes on there, you can turn it into electricity. Now, the physics of this absolutely cook my noodle, so I'm kind of not going to go into that in any great detail. Read the research papers, especially if you suffer from insomnia. That's bound to cure the issue. What else did I predict? I predicted misuse of legitimate platforms, and I got told off last year, sitting in front of the head of the NCA and the NCSC when I told you how to buy illicit goods on reputable websites. This year, we still see that continue. We all know that you can buy illicit goods on legitimate sites, right? It's about key codes and other identifiers, allowing sellers to identify alternate good supply. However, COVID has been a godsend, really, to criminals and opportunists alike. They've got more time at home. They've got access to their attack platforms, but they've still got bills to pay, right? So, how can you blame them for targeting, innocent people? One of the things that we saw recently wasn't about supplying illicit goods. It was actually about supplying legitimate goods. And you'll see from the screenshot there, this was a legitimate good that was sold. It was a COVID test kit. But actually, the interesting thing is that what it required was that you get results. So the user had to supply some details. So you can always rely on a user to use their work account and their password for this, right? Why would you use a personal account? Just use your work account. So how do we know that these things happen? Well, we've seen a rise in forensics cases that have no known breach or compromise of records. So we have to conclude that the users gave away their data freely. We've also investigated these cases where there was a case of a legitimate COVID test being sold, but actually an attacker set up a site where they scraped username and passwords for people logging in before they presented them with a legitimate site for their test results. I also covered malware feasting on cloud deployments. Now, I kind of underestimated this based on COVID. Malware is feasting on everything, and not just malware. There's a whole raft of attack techniques that are going on: phishing, rules and forms attacks, diversion of payment, and creating an easy road into environments. Malware gaining a foothold, errors used to cleave the environment, and attackers live off the land. So one of the things that we've seen change is attackers are using your own tools against you. So if you leave things like sysinternals, applications, so the PS series of stuff, PS exec, PS file, these types of things, what you'll see is that attackers are actually using these in order to not have to bring tools in. So if you bring in things like Mimikatz and this type of stuff to look for passwords and to crack passwords, lots and lots of tools will pick it up. However, if you use legitimate Windows processes like Mave Inject, so Mave is the Microsoft application virtualization injection system. So it allows you to inject running code into virtualized apps or through the application virtualization service itself. Or if you want to actually encrypt the disk in a ransomware case, really easy. Use CryptDLL on there. It's already there. It's already crypto. It allows you to just inject a key. And if you as the attacker control the key, guess what? You can't break it on the system. So don't leave tools lying around. Ransomware, good old-fashioned extortion, brought right up to date in the digital age. And third parties, working in your environment, connected to your environment, trusted. Are they the next victim, or were they the ones that set you up? The one thing that I suppose we maybe underestimated in this was that actually it's not just about one technique anymore. It's about the use of all of these techniques. And what we generally tend to see in the etymology of attacks is that it will start with something like phishing. They'll then push malware into the environment. They'll then use something like Cobalt Strike in order to cleave the environment open. They'll then use internal tools that you've got available. So whether that's PS exec or whether that's CryptDLL or Mave Inject or these types of things, they'll use those. They'll load ransomware. They'll extort you. And then they'll use your own systems like your email servers and those types of things in order to email parties that you're connected to in order to look for their next victim. So when you look at malware, don't just think cloud, don't just think single aspect these days. Generally, they all tend to be linked and provide massive issues for customers. So I talked a bit about the Internet of Everything, and it was Bruce Schneier that coined the phrase Internet of Everything. And really within a 5G world where you've got ubiquitous connectivity across the piece, Internet of Everything becomes possible. You know, smaller and smaller chips, more powerful chips produced at you know, sub-penny type of cost profiles. It becomes more of a, you know, why wouldn't you install a chip rather than why would you install a chip? All of this, though, largely is going to be dependent upon things like 5G. It's going to be dependent upon battery technology, or it's going to be dependent upon wireless charging and wireless charging capability in order to use either near-field chip or other styles of wireless charging in order to be able to charge chips and to be able to interact on most things. I think some of the other things that I talked about around this were the world of transhumanism and digital upload and these types of things as well. And one of the interesting things that we saw, you know, was Kanye West had the hologram created for Kim of Robert Kardashian. And what we know is that actually there's a company over in the US that's making holographics real for the US military. They have like a phone booth, and effectively soldiers can phone home to their loved ones, and they can interact with them in a phone booth style holographic projection system. And this is becoming a real thing. You know, it's advancing at such a rate that actually we're moving way beyond, you know, where we thought we were going to be. There's been an explosion in connected digital implants, and this is going to get quicker and faster and more pervasive in terms of monitoring of human life signs and aspects of human physiology. And you know, we've seen this with a number of different things. You know, your latest Apple Watch can read oxygen saturation within your bloodstream, and this is going to go well beyond that. You know, through the processes of looking at diabetes and beyond. There's a few things that I think we're still may not going to see by the 2022 timeframe, and full digital upload, I think, is still not going to be there. Biological data storage on DNA may, and that's a very interesting avenue of research. If anybody's interested in that, that's actually, you could walk around storing all the photos that you've taken on your iPhone in your own DNA, so that you don't use storage on device anymore. And as soon as you get to that point, full digital upload is going to happen, but it could be slightly creepy, right? What happens when you can store somebody else's personality on your own DNA? Is anybody thinking Black Mirror like I am? I talked a bit about autonomous vehicles last time, and some of the hacks and things that you could do with autonomous vehicles. Now, interestingly, at the moment, you'll see what I've done on there is put the levels of autonomy within vehicles on the list. Level 4, high automation, already here, already possible within things like Teslas and other manufacturers. However, level 5 with full automation, these vehicles exist. They're not available to the public yet. However, Zoox Robotaxis, an Amazon company, is looking to launch the first fully automated taxi. That means no steering wheel, that means no driver, that means nobody controlling that vehicle other than the vehicle itself. Now, is it just me, or is kind of anybody else nervous about this, right? You've got no ability to override the system. We know that you can already trick AI into recognizing a panda as something else. We also know that in the real world, fake roads can't just pop up, right? You've got visual clues to be able to recognize that a road's not there. However, in the digital world, nothing's real. So fake roads can exist and your car can see them. If we as security professionals can't secure home PCs, governments, or critical national infrastructure, what makes anybody think that we can secure autonomous anything at the moment? It's been cited that, it's difficult to hack a car, and it's difficult to hack them at scale, as both the computer and the CAN bus that does most of the control inside it are proprietary. They require time, money, and motivation. Well, on the whole, this tech helps reduce the class break. We did see Jeep back in 2015-16 recall a whole bunch of their vehicles because of a class break that was really easy to do. It's also said that AI drivers are going to become better than humans, and I don't doubt this in any way, shape, or form. However, it was recently estimated that you could bring the likes of New York City to a standstill if you could hack 20% of the cars that were on the road at any one time. Now that's frightening, absolutely frightening. So I've looked back on the things that I previously said. What else do we see on the horizon, both short term and long term? If you want to know, have a look at science fiction, as it has a really nasty habit of becoming science fact. There's always a balance in society between the amount of crime and the number of police officers that we have. When crime reduces, police budgets are cut and the numbers reduce. How come the world's largest economy can form a space force, i.e. military personnel to secure space, and yet we can't secure the internet? Probably because unless there's a physical reality, then no one's really bothered. A few noughts are moved from one column of a spreadsheet to another, so what? However, in the future, the internet is likely to be the communications backbone of everything. At the pace of change that we have, it will not be long before everything is connected. We rely upon it, and we always rely upon it being there. When we fight crime, we all have jurisdictional boundaries. Criminals have no such boundaries, as they're not bound by law or border. They work across borders and hide in places with weak cybercrime laws or governmental protection. We've got no global cybercrime task force. We brag about offensive security and cyber armies, but in most cases, attribution and source identification is the most troublesome aspect of what we do. So we end up with massive collateral damage and we still don't solve the problem. So do we end up with utopia or do we end up with dystopia? Black Mirror shows a very dystopian look at the future. And if you believe what the Maze Group said when they retired, then we've already sleepwalked our way into it with things like cryptocurrency and the way we secure business today. The real answer for me, though, is it's up to all of us. It's up to all of us to decide what future we want. But unless we make changes, I fear that we're going to end up with more of a dystopian than utopian future. So that was a very kind of bleak look at the future. But technology can benefit society in so many ways. I'll look at both the short-term as well as the long-term benefits. I'll look at some of the technology and some of the things that are happening. I'll also look at some of the pitfalls and misuse. So I've selected a couple of things, one for short-term and one for long-term, that I'll look at with you now. AI is a great thing, right? It's a brilliant thing. It's a thing that is going to absolutely revolutionize where we are as a society, how we do things, the care that we can give, the systems that we use, all of those types of things, and then way beyond anything you can think of. You know, we keep hearing about, you know, the next industrial revolution. It's been called 5G, it's been called robotics, it's been called AI. However, I think that AI really is going to be a breakthrough technology. It's going to be used everywhere. It's going to be used for everything. There's no one application, as you can see on the left-hand side. You know, I just picked out some of the things that we're seeing AI or machine learning or deep learning or any of these types of things being used for at the moment. So if we can use it for good, you know, why aren't we accelerating the pace of these things, you know, beyond where they are today? Well, we should be. However, there's also likely to be some issues, and AI being used for bad as well as being used for good. And I picked out a few things that are happening around the world as well. You know, the future of privacy and human rights. When you look at things like singularity, where AI becomes, you know, more smart than humans, drone swarms powered by AI doing facial recognition to target targets that they need. AI powered malware, that's going to be one of the biggest issues that we see that will come and actually impact all of us within our corporate lives. However, when you can misuse these things and they can be used against us, how do you deal with the ethics and morals? Or how do you have the cognitive capacity to scrutinize the decisions that are made? The problem is that a lot of the AI, once you get into the more advanced machine learning, deep learning, and then into AI, the human's brain and its cognitive ability to actually be able to understand not only the programming, but the decision-making process is massively flawed. We just don't have the cognitive capacity in order to be able to do it. What that means is that you have to trust it. Well, if you trust it, how do you know that you've prevented bias within the AI? We've seen examples of racism, sexism, and beyond. How do you cater for regional variation when you know an AI is programmed in one part of the world, but that part of the world doesn't reflect a regional variation in the world that you're using it in? Think of the situation. What happens in a driverless car when an accident is unavoidable? That AI has to make a decision. Who do you save and who do you kill? Is it the driver? Is it the pregnant woman that's crossing the road in front of the car? Or how about the old guy that's next to her? By the way, what I didn't tell you about the old guy that's next to her is on the edge of a breakthrough for cancer. In the more mundane corporate world, though, with the use of AI, what happens when the reliance on emerging technology backfires? Removal of human knowledge from large and complex networks and systems, loss of skills and capacity. What happens on mass automation attacks? What happens when a system fails and you don't understand how the system works? How do you explain what happened? How do you actually fix it? By the way, AI is a good place to be at the moment. It's a really good place to be, both in the corporate world and also in the criminal world. You can go on the criminal underground, you can look at things like the deep web and the dark web, and criminal forums are hiring for AI developers. They also have systems that provide analysis, cracking, general attack networks. Expect a lot of use of AI in malware and also in mainstream breaches very, very shortly. The estimate is that, you know, AI-powered malware and AI-powered criminal as a service is going to take off an exponential rate. And we as defenders, how are we going to defend against, you know, an AI that is just going to keep banging away on the outside of the network, and actually looking at how do we, you know, how do we stop this? How do we actually prevent them getting in? Because if the AI is adaptive and it's learning and it learns who we are and what we do, and you heard about, you know, deep fakes this morning and these types of things as well, you know, how are you going to patch the human? How are you going to patch your systems? How are you going to secure those systems so that, you know, we don't end up in that situation? I think there's a huge way for us to go as defenders, and lots of different things that we are going to need to do as we move forwards. So what about the longer term future? And what do I see in the longer term? So I picked a few things and thought, actually, okay, so if I take robotics, I take quantum, and I take AI, each one of these areas can change the way we see ourselves as well as the universe around us. This is less about tech and actually more about looking at this through a psychological lens. The question of whether we kind of should do a lot of these things, or actually even combine robotics, quantum, and AI. This question and whether we should do that has already been taken out of our hands as it's happening today. The natural safeguards that you would expect to be put in place aren't there. I've sat in a number of global conferences over time, and there are companies that are creating robotics and AI systems where all safeguards and controls for humans and for the way we use them have been removed. If you want to know about, you know, some of the things that have been said about this over the years, one of the best places to look is at science fiction, actually. Have a look at Isaac Asimov. He warned of the need for control within his books. Have a look at his books, or even just watch the new Foundation series that's coming to Apple TV in 2021. I could spend hours talking about each one of these technologies, and probably I've probably bored most of you to tears previously in doing so. But have a look at each of these avenues and have a think about, you know, the security that relates to each one. And if I do that, even then my puny brain is kind of unlikely to be able to think about, you know, some of the consequences of combining this technology just in the standard applications, let alone any of the unintended consequences that may occur from this. Interestingly, Elon Musk warned of this at 8:54 p.m. on the 26th of November 2017. Even so, IBM and Google are already using AI in the development of quantum systems using quantum machine learning. They've just found new ways to reduce the noise in quantum and actually reduce the likelihood of error, so that the predictions, the speed, and the capacity go up. What we also know is that high performance embedded computing chips are already being developed. They're now looking at coupling classic quantum and AI chipsets. It's already in research. Progress is being made. We all like the idea of having things done for us, moving to a higher psychological plane and indulging everything that makes us human. Think about holographic projectors that can change reality around you as you move through it. But think on the other side, if that happens, think about the opportunity for the likes of Google and Facebook for advertising revenues. If you're using holographic projectors as you move around, they'll be able to stream adverts into you at every point and as you move forwards. However, think about the other side and the arms race that's going to come from this. At the end of the day, these are devices and you can weaponize them. The company controlling them could as easily benefit the world just as easily as it could overthrow governments. If you want to see what this could look like, have a look at the series on the TV, Years and Years, Humans, Black Mirror, Battlestar Galactica, Foundation. There's a whole bunch that have been produced, and that's where we could end up. So thank you for listening, and hopefully you've enjoyed my wander through the future of security and cybercrime and what it may look like in coming years. I'll sum up with technology gets smarter and more automated. Our ability to understand it becomes less, and our ability to secure it even less. We have to rely more and more on vendors or using multiple solutions to secure it. Don't get into the illusion, though, that security theater, that's where you get perceived security without actual security, is going to be a real issue for us. Single control failures and these types of things may cause you problems. Now, what about cybercrime? Well, what it's taught me is that we need to work harder. The illusion of security when none may exist is a massive issue for us today. Having investigated a lot of crime this year, it's been evident that most companies suffer a breach due to the failure of single control, missing patch, compromised set of credentials, AV not picking up malware. We've learned that attackers only ever get better, not worse, and that they use our own tools and solutions against us. We have the chance, and we have to change the way that we think about the way that we do security. We have to change to a defensive model. And we have to ensure that all, and I mean all, security holes are patched instantly, software is proactive, and that no single control can lead to the breach of our organization. As we move forwards, both governments and companies and people have to change. Whether we like it or not, governments and law enforcement hold part of this answer. The rest of it is in all of us to demand more from ourselves, educate others, and demand more from the people that produce our security solutions. Now, I don't see any questions. If anybody wants to ask questions, I'll take questions for a couple of minutes and then leave you with 5 minutes or so in order to be able to get yourself a cup of coffee before the phenomenal Ben Hammersley comes on, and hopefully, does a bit more and a bit of a further extension to my presentation, which would be very nice. Well, I can't see any questions. If any of you out there have them, I'll give you a minute or so just to type them in. I'll happily answer anything that you want to know. Well, as there's no questions that have come in to me. Oh, yeah, here we go. It says not question, but we should have a long chat over a beer sometime. I'd love to. Happy to have a beer post-COVID world. Clearly, either that or we can have a bring your own beer and a chat on there. Yeah, happy to do so. If anybody wants to grab me afterwards, please feel free to do so. If you enjoyed the presentation today, then my name was Steve Marshall. If you didn't, then my name was Ben Hammersley, and come find me in the chat rooms, and I'll be there to answer any other questions. Thanks very much all. Cheers and bye-bye.